My name is Jessica, and I'm 34 years old. I was hanging streamers in my backyard when my phone rang. It was supposed to be the perfect day, my son Tyler's 9th birthday party. I'd been saving for 6 months, planning every detail, and Tyler had been counting down the days. The decorations were up, the cake was ready, and I could see Tyler through the window, practically bouncing with excitement. Then my mother's voice cut through my happiness like a knife. "Jessica, you need to cancel the party right now. Brittany and Chloe are heartbroken because they don't get parties like this. You're being selfish." I stared at the phone, my world tilting. My own mother was choosing my sister's children over my son on his special day. Before we dive into what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story hits close to home, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more family drama stories. Trust me, you'll want to see how this birthday betrayal led to the most shocking family showdown you've ever heard. Now, let me tell you exactly how my family's toxic favoritism pushed me to my breaking point and what I did about it. Let me paint you the picture of my family dynamics, because understanding this mess starts way before that devastating phone call. 3 years ago, my world shattered when my husband Matt died in a car accident, leaving me to raise Tyler alone. While I was drowning in grief and learning to navigate single motherhood, my older sister Amber was living what seemed like a fairy tale. She'd married Derek, a man who flashed money around like confetti, and together they had 2 daughters, Brittany, who's 7, and Chloe, who's 5. Their lifestyle was the kind you see in magazines: elaborate vacations, designer clothes for the girls, and birthday parties that cost more than my monthly salary as a registered nurse. But here's where it gets twisted. My mother Linda had always favored Amber, even when we were kids. Amber was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the afterthought, the one who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. When Matt died, I naively thought tragedy might bring us closer together. Instead, it seemed to widen the gap. Linda would visit Amber's pristine house with its marble countertops and perfectly manicured lawn, then come to my modest rental home with its second-hand furniture and make subtle comments about how I needed to do better for Tyler's sake. The birthday parties were where this favoritism really stung. Amber threw extravagant celebrations that looked like they belonged on Pinterest: pony rides, professional entertainers, custom cakes that cost more than my grocery budget for a month. Linda would attend these parties and gush about how wonderful Amber was as a mother, how lucky Brittany and Chloe were to have such thoughtful parents. Meanwhile, Tyler's birthdays were small affairs in our apartment complex's community room or our tiny backyard, with homemade cake and decorations from the dollar store. Not that Tyler minded, he was just happy to celebrate, but I could see Linda comparing, always comparing. So when I decided to make Tyler's 9th birthday special, I'd been saving every penny for months. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, cut back on everything I could, and planned a backyard party that would finally give my son the kind of celebration he deserved. Nothing over the top, just good food, nice decorations, and genuine joy. I thought maybe, just maybe, my family would see that I was a good mother who loved her son enough to sacrifice for his happiness. Instead, that phone call told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in the family hierarchy. "Jessica, you can't do this to those poor girls," Linda continued on the phone, her voice taking on that familiar tone of disappointment I'd heard my entire life. Amber called me in tears because Brittany asked why Tyler gets such a nice party when theirs wasn't as elaborate this year. The irony wasn't lost on me. Amber's not as elaborate party had still cost more than I made in 2 weeks, complete with a bounce house and catered food. But apparently, it wasn't enough when compared to my backyard streamers and grocery store cake. This wasn't about the girls feeling left out, this was about Amber maintaining her position as the superior mother, and my mother enabling her delusion. The moment I hung up with my mother, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial my best friend Carol's number. Carol and I had been working together at Regional Medical Center for 8 years, and she'd seen me through the worst moments of my life: Matt's death, the lonely nights when Tyler had nightmares, the financial struggles that kept me awake calculating bills. When I told her what my mother had just demanded, there was a long pause before she exploded with indignation. Jessica, that is absolutely insane. Carol's voice came through the phone like a lifeline. You've been planning this party for months. Tyler has been talking about it nonstop at the hospital when you bring him by. Your mother is out of her mind if she thinks you should cancel your son's birthday party because your spoiled nieces might feel jealous. She was right, and hearing someone validate my feelings gave me the first spark of courage I'd felt since answering that phone call. You know what? Make this party happen. Tyler deserves this, and honestly, your family needs a reality check about how they've been treating you. With Carol's encouragement burning in my chest, I decided to push forward. I called my Aunt Martha, my Uncle Robert, and a few cousins, inviting them to Tyler's party. Most of them seemed genuinely excited to celebrate with us, and for a brief moment, I felt like maybe I could create the loving family atmosphere Tyler deserved, even if my immediate family wasn't supportive. I was in the middle of confirming the head count when my phone rang again. This time, it was Amber, and her voice was pure venom. What the hell do you think you're doing, Jessica? She hissed into the phone. Mom told me you're refusing to cancel Tyler's party. Do you have any idea how upset my girls are? Brittany has been crying for an hour because she thinks you don't love her as much as Tyler. The manipulation in her voice was so thick I could practically taste it. This had nothing to do with her daughter's feelings and everything to do with Amber's need to be the center of attention, the perfect mother with the perfect life that everyone else should aspire to. Amber, this is Tyler's birthday, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been saving money for months to give him one special day. Your girls have beautiful parties all the time. Can't Tyler have one celebration without it being a problem? But Amber wasn't interested in reason or fairness. Instead, she launched into a tirade about how I'd always been jealous of her success, how I resented her happiness because I was a bitter widow who couldn't move on with my life. The words hit like physical blows, each one designed to make me feel small, pathetic, and guilty for daring to want something good for my son. The conversation escalated when Derek, Amber's husband, suddenly grabbed the phone. His voice was cold and calculating in a way that made my skin crawl. Jessica, you're clearly having some kind of emotional breakdown. First you ignore your mother's reasonable request, now you're upsetting my wife and daughters. If you continue this selfish behavior and refuse to put family harmony first, we'll have to consider whether you're fit to make decisions about Tyler's well-being. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. He wasn't just talking about the party anymore, he was threatening my son, my custody, my entire world. By the time I hung up, I was trembling with rage and fear, but something deeper had crystallized inside me. For years, I'd accepted their treatment, their subtle and not-so-subtle put-downs, their constant message that I wasn't good enough. But threatening Tyler crossed a line that awakened something fierce and protective in me. This wasn't just about a birthday party anymore, this was about breaking a cycle of abuse that had gone on far too long. Tyler deserved better than a family that saw him as disposable, and I was going to make sure he got it. The next morning brought a knock at my door that made my stomach drop. Through the peephole, I saw my mother Linda standing on my porch with Brittany and Chloe in tow, both girls dressed in their most pitiful outfits, clothes that were clearly chosen to make them look vulnerable and sad. Linda's face wore that expression I knew so well from childhood, the one that said I was about to be taught a lesson about my selfishness and ingratitude. I opened the door reluctantly, knowing that whatever was about to happen, it was going to hurt. We came by to see Tyler, Linda announced, pushing past me into my living room where my birthday decorations were still hanging from the night before. Girls, look at all these pretty decorations. Isn't it wonderful that Tyler gets such a special party? Her tone was syrupy sweet, but there was poison underneath every word. I watched in horror as she guided Brittany and Chloe around my modest decorations, pointing out each banner, each balloon, each carefully planned detail that I'd worked so hard to afford. Brittany's eyes filled with tears on cue. Grandma Linda, why does Tyler get all of this when we didn't get decorations like this for our party? The question sounded rehearsed, like she'd been coached on exactly what to say and when to say it. Chloe, who was only 5 but already learning the family dynamics, chimed in with her own devastating blow. does Aunt Jessica not love us like she loves Tyler? Is that why he gets the pretty party and we don't? The manipulation was masterful and cruel. Linda had brought these innocent children to my home specifically to weaponize their emotions against me, to make me feel like a monster for wanting to celebrate my son's birthday. You see what you've done, Jessica? Linda said, her voice rising with righteous indignation. These poor babies don't understand why their cousin gets special treatment. How do you expect me to explain to them that their aunt cares more about showing off than about family feelings? I tried desperately to explain that their party had been beautiful, that they'd had wonderful celebrations, that this wasn't a competition. But Linda cut me off with a viciousness that took my breath away. Don't you dare make excuses. You're just like your father, selfish, stubborn, and completely incapable of putting family first. The comparison to my father, who had walked out on us when I was 12, was a calculated cruelty designed to hit me where it hurt most. And you know what? Matt was the same way. Selfish and reckless, thinking only of himself. That's why he was driving so fast that night he died, because he was too selfish to think about what would happen to his family. The words hit me like a physical assault. Bringing up Matt's death, twisting it into some kind of character flaw, using my grief as a weapon, it was beyond cruel. Tyler, who had been in his room getting dressed, must have heard Linda's raised voice because he came running downstairs to see what was happening. What he saw was his grandmother screaming at his mother while his young cousins cried, and the confusion and hurt on his face broke something inside me. Mom, why is everyone upset? Tyler asked quietly, looking back and forth between the sobbing girls and my tear-stained face. Did I do something wrong with my birthday? The innocence in his question, the way he immediately blamed himself for the adults' dysfunction, filled me with a rage so pure and protective that my hands started shaking. This 9-year-old boy was taking responsibility for the toxic behavior of grown adults who should have been protecting him. I found my voice then, cold and steady despite the fury burning in my chest. Linda, you need to leave my house right now. You don't get to come into my home, manipulate children, and attack my dead husband. Get out. But Linda wasn't finished with her psychological warfare. As she gathered the girls to leave, she turned back to me with one final threat that would haunt me for days. You're making a terrible mistake, Jessica. Family is all we have, and you're destroying it with your selfishness. You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life, and so will Tyler. The door slammed behind them, leaving me and Tyler standing in our decorated living room that now felt tainted by the ugliness that had just unfolded. Tyler looked up at me with those big brown eyes that looked so much like his father's and asked the question that shattered my heart. Mom, do you think we should cancel my party so Brittany and Chloe won't be sad? In that moment, I realized that the damage my family was doing went far beyond hurt feelings. They were teaching my son that his happiness didn't matter, that he should sacrifice his joy for other people's comfort. That was a lesson I refused to let him learn. Saturday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety sitting heavy in my stomach, but I was determined to make Tyler's 9th birthday special despite the family drama swirling around us. I'd spent the early hours setting up our backyard with renewed determination, hanging lights between the fence posts and arranging tables with bright tablecloths that fluttered in the gentle breeze. Tyler was practically vibrating with excitement, running around in his new birthday shirt and helping me arrange chairs while asking for the 100th time when his guests would arrive. By 2 o'clock, when the party was supposed to start, only Carol had shown up, along with 2 of my coworkers from the hospital who'd always been kind to Tyler. The silence from my extended family was deafening. Every aunt, uncle, and cousin who had initially said they'd be there had mysteriously become unavailable. It was clear that Linda had made good on her threat to turn the family against me, painting me as the villain who chose to hurt children rather than cancel a birthday party. Tyler kept checking the front window, his excitement slowly dimming as he realized that most of the people he'd expected weren't coming. Mom, maybe they're just running late? Tyler said hopefully, but I could see the disappointment creeping into his expression. Carol immediately stepped in, her nurse's instincts for comforting upset children kicking into high gear. You know what, Tyler? Sometimes the best parties are the ones with just the people who really love you. Want to show me that new skateboard trick you've been practicing? Her kindness in that moment meant everything to me, and I watched Tyler's smile return as he showed off his skills to an enthusiastic audience. Just as we were lighting the candles on Tyler's homemade chocolate cake, I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. My heart sank when I saw Amber's white SUV pulling up, because I knew she wasn't here to make peace or celebrate Tyler's birthday. Derek emerged from the driver's side with his phone already out, clearly recording, while Amber climbed out of the passenger seat wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Brittany and Chloe tumbled out of the back seat, both dressed like they were attending a funeral rather than a birthday party. Amber swept into my backyard with all the dramatic flair of someone performing for an audience, which, given Derek's phone camera, she essentially was. "Tyler. Happy birthday, sweetheart," she exclaimed, loud enough for everyone in the neighborhood to hear. "Aunt Amber couldn't let you celebrate alone, so we brought you something very special." She produced an enormous gift bag from behind her back, the kind of expensive present that made my carefully chosen gifts look pathetic in comparison. The manipulation was obvious to any adult watching, but to Tyler, it just looked like his aunt being generous. What happened next was a masterclass in passive-aggressive destruction. While Derek continued filming and Amber made a show of being the loving aunt who'd rescued Tyler's birthday, Brittany and Chloe began what could only be described as systematic chaos. They ran through the party area, knocking over decorations I'd carefully placed, spilling drinks on the tablecloths, and generally disrupting every aspect of the celebration I'd worked so hard to create. When I tried to gently redirect them, Amber immediately snapped at me. "Jessica, they're just children. Maybe if you knew how to properly supervise kids at a party, accidents wouldn't happen." Her voice was sweet as honey, but her words were designed to make me look incompetent in front of the few guests I did have. Derek's camera caught every moment, no doubt planning to use the footage as evidence of my poor parenting skills later. The final blow came when Chloe accidentally bumped into the table holding Tyler's birthday cake, sending it sliding to the ground in a mess of chocolate frosting and broken candles. Tyler's face crumpled as he watched his special cake destroyed, and in that moment, I saw everything my family had put us through reflected in my son's eyes. The disappointment, the confusion about why people who were supposed to love us kept hurting us, the slow understanding that he wasn't as important to them as he should be. Amber, of course, immediately began making a show of cleaning up the mess while apologizing loudly about what a terrible accident it was, all while Derek's camera rolled and recorded Tyler's heartbreak for their twisted documentation. After an hour of watching my carefully planned party get systematically destroyed, Amber and Derek announced they had to leave for another commitment, but not before Amber made one final performance. She hugged Tyler tightly in front of Derek's camera and said, "Aunt Amber will always be here for you, sweetheart, even when other people make bad choices that hurt the family." The message was clear. They were the heroes of this story, the loving family members who'd tried to salvage a disaster created by my selfishness. As they drove away, I stood in my destroyed backyard surrounded by the wreckage of my son's birthday party, finally understanding that this wasn't just favoritism or family dysfunction. This was war, and they'd just fired the first real shot. The Sunday after Tyler's destroyed birthday party, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table at 5 a.m, staring at my coffee cup and wrestling with the most difficult decision of my life. Tyler was still asleep upstairs, and the quiet house felt heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. My son had spent his 9th birthday watching his cake get destroyed while his own family members smiled and filmed his heartbreak. The image of his disappointed face when he realized most of his relatives weren't coming kept playing in my mind like a cruel movie on repeat. Tyler had tried so hard to be brave about the whole thing, telling me that night that it was still a good party because you were there, Mom. But I'd seen the confusion in his eyes when he asked me why Aunt Amber's kids always seemed upset when he was happy, why Grandma Linda got angry when he got presents, why his cousins never wanted to play with him even though he tried so hard to include them. The innocence in his questions broke my heart because I realized he was starting to learn the same painful lessons about our family that I'd learned as a child. That love in our house was conditional, that his worth was somehow tied to other people's feelings, that his happiness was less important than keeping the peace. That morning, as I sat in the early dawn light feeling more alone than I'd ever felt since Matt's death, Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway in his pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mom, are you sad about my party?" he asked with that heart-wrenching concern that children have when they sense their parents are struggling. "Because if it made everyone mad, maybe I don't need parties anymore. I don't want Grandma Linda to be upset with you because of me." The fact that my 9-year-old son was willing to give up birthday parties forever to protect me from his own grandmother's cruelty was the moment I realized I had to stop being a victim and start being a fighter. Carol arrived that afternoon with Chinese takeout and a determination to help me figure out what was really going on with my family's increasingly strange behavior. "This isn't normal family drama, Jess," she said as we spread lo mein and orange chicken across my dining room table while Tyler played in his room. "I've seen dysfunctional families before, but this feels calculated. The way they filmed Tyler's party, the way they brought those kids specifically to cause chaos, the threats about custody, this feels like they're building a case for something." With Carol's encouragement, I decided to start making some phone calls to family members I hadn't spoken to in years. My first call was to my Aunt Martha, Linda's younger sister who lived 3 states away and had always been the truth-teller of the family. When I explained what had been happening, the long pause on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. "Oh honey, I've been worried about this for months," Martha said, her voice heavy with concern. "Your mother called me last Christmas, going on and on about how Amber was struggling financially despite Derek's good job, how they'd had to borrow money for the girls' school tuition and their house payment. But then she'd talk about Amber's expensive vacations and designer clothes, and none of it made sense. When I asked Linda about the contradiction, she got defensive and said I wouldn't understand because I don't have grandchildren to worry about." The conversation with Martha opened a floodgate of information that made my blood run cold. Linda had been telling different relatives different stories about Amber's financial situation, sometimes painting her as a struggling mother who needed support, other times bragging about her success and prosperity. Martha revealed that Linda had been asking various family members for loans over the past year, always with some story about helping Amber through a temporary crisis. The amounts were significant hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars that were never paid back. "There's something else, Jessica," Martha continued, and I could hear the reluctance in her voice. "Linda told me last month that she'd sold her house and moved in with Amber and Derek. She said it was to help with the grandchildren, but I got the feeling there was more to it. She seemed nervous when she talked about it, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me that it was a good decision." As I hung up with Martha, the pieces of a much larger picture began falling into place. Linda wasn't living with Amber out of choice or to help with childcare, she'd been financially manipulated into giving up her independence. The sudden escalation in their attacks on me, the threats about Tyler's custody, the systematic destruction of his birthday party while filming everything, none of this was random family drama. This was a coordinated campaign to isolate me and Tyler from the rest of the family, and I was beginning to suspect I knew why. That evening, after Tyler had gone to bed, I sat down with a notebook and began writing down everything I could remember about Derek and Amber's behavior over the past year. The expensive gifts that seemed designed to make others feel inadequate, the way Derek always steered conversations toward people's financial situations, the subtle threats about Tyler's well-being that had started months before the birthday party incident. What I discovered was a pattern of manipulation and control that made my skin crawl, and I realized that Tyler and I weren't just dealing with family favoritism anymore. We were dealing with something much more dangerous, and I needed to be very careful about my next moves. Armed with the information Martha had given me and a fury that had been building for weeks, I decided it was time to confront my family directly about what was really going on. I waited until the following Sunday, when I knew they'd all be gathered at Linda's usual family dinner, except Linda wasn't hosting anymore because she'd lost her house, something they'd conveniently failed to mention to most of the family. The dinner was now at Amber's pristine house, in the dining room where Derek liked to display his success like a peacock showing off his feathers. I arrived unannounced, walking up the circular driveway past Derek's expensive cars and Amber's perfectly manicured flower beds. Through the large windows, I could see the family gathered around the dinner table, probably discussing how terrible I was and how poor Tyler suffered from having such a selfish mother. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were having these conversations in a house that was likely mortgaged beyond its value, furnished with money borrowed from an elderly woman who now had nowhere else to live. When Amber opened the front door, her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, anger, and then that fake smile she'd perfected for social situations. "Jessica. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you for dinner tonight." The emphasis on expecting was her way of telling me I wasn't welcome, but I'd come too far and learned too much to be turned away by her passive-aggressive hints. "I'm not here for dinner, Amber. I'm here to talk to my mother about some very interesting information I've received about her living situation and her finances." I pushed past her into the foyer, my voice carrying loud enough for everyone in the dining room to hear. "Specifically, about how much money she's given you and Derek over the past year, and why she had to sell her house to do it." The explosion that followed was immediate and spectacular. Derek shot up from his chair, his face red with rage, while Linda gasped like I'd just slapped her across the face. Amber began sputtering about how dare I come into her home and make accusations, but I was just getting started. Years of being made to feel small and inadequate had given way to a righteous anger that wouldn't be silenced by their usual intimidation tactics. "Let me tell you what I've learned from actually talking to family members instead of listening to your carefully crafted stories," I continued, facing the room full of shocked faces. "Linda sold her house 6 months ago because she'd borrowed against it multiple times to give you money, Amber. She's not living here because she wants to help with the grandchildren, she's living here because she has nowhere else to go and no money left to get her own place." Derek stepped forward with that cold, calculating look that I'd seen during our phone conversation. "You have a lot of nerve coming into my house and spreading lies about my family. We've been nothing but generous to Linda, giving her a place to live when she needed it most. The fact that you're so jealous of our success that you'd make up financial stories shows exactly why we've been concerned about Tyler's environment." But I was ready for his deflection tactics this time. "Generous? You mean like the generosity you showed my son on his birthday when you filmed his heartbreak for your own documentation? Or the generosity of threatening his custody because I wouldn't cancel his party?" The room fell silent except for the sound of Linda's sharp intake of breath. "Because yes, Derek, I know about your little custody investigation. I know you've been building a case to take Tyler away from me, probably to get the government benefits that come with caring for a child whose father died serving his community." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and I watched Derek's face change as he realized I'd figured out more than he'd expected. But the biggest shock came from Linda, who suddenly stood up with a trembling voice and said, "Jessica, what are you talking about? What custody investigation?" The look of genuine confusion on my mother's face told me everything I needed to know. Whatever Derek and Amber had been planning, they hadn't included Linda in the full scope of their scheme. She'd been manipulated just as thoroughly as I had, just in a different way. The realization that she wasn't the mastermind behind the Tyler custody threat, but rather another victim of Derek and Amber's manipulation, shifted something in my understanding of the whole situation. "Oh, Linda doesn't know about that part," I said, watching Derek's face grow paler by the second. "She doesn't know that while she was giving you her life savings to support your lifestyle, you were planning to take her grandson away from his mother to access his Social Security survivor benefits. She doesn't know that every family dinner where you complained about my parenting was really you laying groundwork to claim Tyler was being neglected." The explosion that followed was unlike anything our family had ever experienced. Linda turned on Derek with a fury I'd never seen from her, demanding to know if what I'd said was true. Amber tried to deny everything while simultaneously throwing Derek under the bus, claiming she'd had no idea what he was planning. Derek, cornered and exposed, finally showed his true colors by threatening to throw Linda out of the house if she didn't control her daughter's hysterical accusations. That threat was Derek's biggest mistake. In one sentence, he'd revealed exactly what Linda's position in their household really was: not a beloved grandmother helping with childcare, but a financial resource who could be discarded when she was no longer useful. The look of dawning horror on Linda's face as she understood how completely she'd been manipulated was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. Almost, but not quite, because her favoritism and cruelty toward Tyler and me had created the perfect conditions for Derek and Amber to operate. The evening ended with Linda packing a bag and leaving with me, not because we'd suddenly resolved our relationship issues, but because she finally understood that Derek and Amber were dangerous to everyone in the family, including her. As we drove away from that perfect house with its perfect facade hiding the corruption underneath, I realized that exposing the truth had been only the first step. Derek and Amber weren't going to give up their plans easily, and the real battle for Tyler's safety was just beginning. The week following my confrontation at Amber's house passed in an eerie calm that made my skin crawl with anticipation. Derek and Amber had gone silent on social media, stopped their usual barrage of family group texts about their wonderful life, and hadn't made any attempts to contact me or Linda. I should have known they were using that time to plan their retaliation, because Derek was nothing if not methodical in his cruelty. The attack, when it came, was swift, coordinated, and designed to destroy my life completely. It started on Thursday morning when I arrived at work to find my supervisor, Karen, waiting for me at the nurse's station with an expression I'd never seen before: a mixture of concern, confusion, and something that looked like disappointment. "Jessica, we need to talk. There's been a formal complaint filed against you regarding your home situation and its potential impact on your nursing license." My heart stopped as she led me into her office, where a thick folder sat on her desk like an unexploded bomb waiting to devastate my career. The complaint, filed by Derek using his business letterhead to make it look official, painted a picture of me as an unstable single mother whose grief over her husband's death had led to erratic behavior, poor judgment, and potential neglect of my child. It included photos from Tyler's birthday party, carefully edited to show only the chaos and destruction, not the context of how it had been created. There were witness statements from Amber and Linda describing my emotional outbursts and inappropriate responses to normal family discussions. But the most devastating part was a medical report claiming Tyler had come to school with unexplained bruises, suggesting possible abuse at home. Karen's face was grave as she explained that the hospital had no choice but to suspend me pending a full investigation, since any nurse facing child abuse allegations couldn't continue working with vulnerable patients. "I'm sorry, Jessica. I've worked with you for 8 years, and this doesn't sound like the woman I know, but my hands are tied until this gets sorted out." As I cleaned out my locker in a daze, Carol appeared beside me with tears in her eyes and rage radiating from every pore of her body. "This is absolute insanity. Those bruises they're talking about are from Tyler's soccer practice. I was there when he fell during that scrimmage last week. Derek must have had someone watching your house, taking pictures, waiting for any opportunity to twist normal childhood activities into evidence of abuse." That afternoon brought a knock on my door that I'd been dreading since the day Derek first threatened Tyler's custody. The woman standing on my porch identified herself as Mrs. Patterson from Child Protective Services, and her professional kindness couldn't hide the gravity of why she was there. "Ms. Johnson, we've received some concerning reports about your son's welfare. I need to conduct a home visit and speak with Tyler privately. I want you to know that this is just an investigation, and you're not being accused of anything at this point." The investigation that followed was thorough and humiliating. Mrs. Patterson examined every inch of my house, took photos of Tyler's room, and asked detailed questions about our daily routines, Tyler's school performance, and my support system. The worst part was watching Tyler's confusion as he was questioned about whether Mommy ever hurt him, whether he felt safe at home, whether anyone had told him to say certain things about his family members. "Tyler, some people are saying your mommy might have hurt you and caused these bruises on your legs," Mrs. Patterson said gently, showing him photos that Derek must have taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. "Can you tell me how you got these marks?" I held my breath as Tyler looked at the pictures with genuine confusion before his face lit up with understanding. "Oh, that's from soccer. I scored a goal, but I fell down and scraped my leg on the field. Coach Williams put a bandage on it and everything. Mom was so proud of the goal that she took me for ice cream after practice. Tyler's innocent honesty was beautiful, but I could see Mrs. Patterson making notes, no doubt about how a 9-year-old might be coached to give certain answers. The real blow came when Mrs. Patterson explained that Derek had provided the court with documentation of my unstable mental state following my husband's death, complete with statements from family members about my inability to cope with single parenthood. Linda, in her confusion and manipulation, had apparently given a statement months ago describing me as overwhelmed and sometimes inappropriate in my responses to normal family stress. She'd meant it as concern, not accusations, but Derek had twisted her words into evidence of my unfitness as a mother. I have to inform you that there will be a hearing next week to determine whether temporary custody of Tyler should be transferred to his extended family while this investigation continues, Mrs. Patterson said as she prepared to leave. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison have petitioned the court, claiming they can provide a more stable environment during this difficult time. The use of Derek's last name for Amber, the formal language that made my sister and her husband sound like strangers rather than family members, drove home just how completely they'd weaponized the legal system against me. That night, after Tyler had gone to bed still confused about why the nice lady had asked him so many questions, I sat in my living room and faced the reality that I might lose my son. Derek and Amber had been planning this for months, carefully documenting every moment of family stress, every sign of my struggle as a single mother, every instance where I'd stood up for myself or Tyler. They'd turned my grief into evidence of mental instability, Tyler's normal childhood injuries into signs of abuse, and my family's dysfunction into proof that I was an unfit parent. The cruelest irony was that everything they were using against me, my financial struggles, my isolation from family support, my emotional responses to their cruelty, were direct results of their own systematic campaign to undermine and destroy me. They'd spent months creating the very conditions they were now using to justify taking Tyler away from the only parent he'd ever truly had. As I stared at the ceiling that night, unable to sleep, I realized that this wasn't just about money or custody or even their twisted need for control. This was about the complete destruction of my life, and they were succeeding. Friday morning brought salvation from the most unexpected source. I was sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents and trying to figure out how I could possibly afford a lawyer when Tyler was at school, when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a tall man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase, and my first thought was that Derek had sent another official to deliver more bad news. When I opened the door, however, the man's warm smile and familiar eyes told a completely different story. "Jessica? I'm Jake Sullivan, Matt's older brother. I know we've never met properly, but I've been following what's happening to you and Tyler, and I think it's time we had a conversation." Jake looked so much like Matt that for a moment I could barely breathe, the same dark hair, the same gentle expression, the same way of holding himself that had always made me feel safe. "I'm a family lawyer, and I have some information about your brother-in-law Derek that I think you need to hear." Over coffee in my living room, Jake revealed that he'd been quietly investigating Derek for months after hearing concerning stories from other family members about suspicious financial schemes and manipulation tactics. "Derek Morrison has a pattern, Jessica. You and Tyler aren't his first targets. I've tracked down 3 other families he's scammed over the past 5 years, using variations of the same tactics he's using on you. Isolate the victim, create financial dependence, then swoop in to take control of assets or custody when people are most vulnerable." Jake opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder that was thick with documentation, court records showing Derek's previous financial crimes, statements from former business partners who'd been defrauded, and most shocking of all, evidence that Derek was facing massive gambling debts that had put him in danger with some very serious people. He needs Tyler's Social Security survivor benefits not just for the monthly income, but as collateral to renegotiate his debts. Taking custody of Tyler isn't just about money, it's about Derek's survival. The picture Jake painted was terrifying and crystal clear. Derek had married Amber specifically because she came from a family with assets he could manipulate: Linda's house, my steady nursing income, and Tyler's survivor benefits were all part of a calculated long-term financial plan. The birthday party destruction, the custody threats, even the systematic undermining of my reputation, were all carefully orchestrated steps in a scheme that had been in motion since Derek first entered our family. But here's what Derek doesn't know, Jake continued, his voice taking on the confident tone of someone who'd spent years winning legal battles. I've been building a case against him for months. I have financial records showing how he's systematically stolen from your mother, documentation of his gambling debts, and testimony from his previous victims about his modus operandi. Most importantly, I have evidence that he's been coaching Brittany and Chloe to lie about Tyler's behavior and your parenting. Jake pulled out his phone and played a recording that made my blood run cold. It was Derek's voice, clearly speaking to his daughters. Remember, girls, if anyone asks about Uncle Tyler's birthday party, you say that Aunt Jessica was mean and scary, and that Tyler gets treated better than you do. Daddy needs you to help protect Tyler from his mommy, who isn't taking good care of him. The manipulation of those innocent children for his criminal purposes was so evil that I actually felt nauseous listening to it. How did you get this? I asked, hardly able to believe that such perfect evidence existed. Jake's smile turned grim as he explained that Carol, my loyal friend from the hospital, had been working with him for weeks. She'd suspected something was wrong when Derek and Amber's accusations against me were so perfectly timed and documented, and she'd reached out to Jake after Matt's parents mentioned that their lawyer's son was concerned about Tyler's welfare. The revelation that I hadn't been fighting this battle alone, that there were people working behind the scenes to protect Tyler and me, was so overwhelming that I started crying right there at my kitchen table. For weeks, I'd felt completely isolated and powerless, watching my life get systematically destroyed by people who were supposed to love us. Learning that Matt's brother had been building a defense for us, that Carol had been gathering evidence and not just offering emotional support, gave me the first real hope I'd felt since this nightmare began. There's something else, Jessica, Jake said, his voice becoming even more serious. I need you to know that Derek is getting desperate. His gambling creditors have given him until the end of next week to come up with a substantial payment, and Tyler's custody is his only remaining plan. He's going to escalate his attacks on you in the next few days, probably trying to provoke you into doing something that would look bad in court. You need to be prepared for whatever he throws at you. Jake was right about Derek's desperation, but none of us anticipated just how low he was willing to go. That evening, as Tyler and I were having dinner, my phone rang with a call from Tyler's school. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, sounded shaken as she explained that someone had called in an anonymous report claiming I'd threatened to hurt Tyler if he told anyone about problems at home. I don't believe it for a second, Jessica, she assured me, but I'm required by law to report this to the authorities. I wanted to give you a heads up that you'll probably be getting another visit from Child Services. As I hung up the phone, Tyler looked at me with those wise beyond his years eyes and asked, Mom, are the bad people trying to take me away from you? The fact that my 9-year-old son understood exactly what was happening, that he could see through Derek and Amber's manipulation even when the adults around us sometimes couldn't, broke my heart and filled me with fierce pride at the same time. Yes, baby, but we have good people helping us fight the bad people. And no matter what happens, I will never stop fighting to keep you safe. That night, Jake stayed late helping me prepare for the custody hearing that was now just days away. We went through every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every financial record that would prove Derek and Amber's true motives. For the first time since this battle began, I felt like we might actually win. But I also knew that Derek, backed into a corner and facing financial ruin, was capable of anything. The real war was just about to begin. The courthouse on Monday morning looked like the setting for the most important battle of my life, and in many ways, it was exactly that. Jake had arranged to meet me an hour before the hearing to go over our strategy one final time, but when I arrived at the designated conference room, I discovered we had reinforcements I hadn't expected. Carol was there with a thick folder of her own, Mrs. Patterson from Child Services was present with what looked like a completely different attitude than she'd had during her home visit, and most surprisingly, My mother Linda sat at the table with tears streaming down her face and a determination I'd rarely seen from her. Jessica, I need you to know that I've given a full statement about what Derek and Amber have been doing to our family, Linda said, her voice shaky but resolute. I was so blinded by their manipulation and my own favoritism toward Amber that I nearly let them destroy you and Tyler. I've told Mr. Sullivan everything, the money they took from me, the way they coached me to criticize your parenting, even the times Derek suggested that Tyler might be better off with them. The admission was more than I'd ever expected from my mother, and while it didn't erase years of painful favoritism, it represented a crack in the wall that had divided our family. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat and began explaining how the investigation had taken a dramatic turn over the weekend. We received some very disturbing evidence about Mr. Morrison's motives for seeking custody of Tyler, she said, pulling out a file that looked substantial enough to sink a battleship. Including recordings of him coaching his daughters to make false statements about both you and Tyler, financial records showing his systematic fraud against your mother, and testimony from previous victims of his schemes in other states. Jake smiled grimly as he added the final piece of our puzzle. Derek's gambling creditors got impatient waiting for their money. They contacted his workplace on Friday afternoon, and by Saturday morning, Derek Morrison was unemployed and facing criminal charges for embezzlement. His house is in foreclosure, his cars are being repossessed, and he's currently hiding from both law enforcement and the people he owes money to. The man who claimed he could provide a better environment for Tyler is about to be homeless himself. When we entered the courtroom, I was shocked to see that Derek was not present. Amber sat alone at the defendant's table with a court-appointed attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Her designer outfit couldn't hide the fact that she looked haggard and defeated, and when she glanced over at our table, I saw fear in her eyes for the first time since this whole nightmare began. The hearing itself was swift and decisive. Jake presented our evidence methodically. The recordings of Derek coaching his children to lie, financial documents showing the systematic theft from Linda, statements from Derek's previous victims in other states, and testimony from Tyler's teachers about what a well-adjusted, happy child he was despite the trauma his family had put him through. When the judge asked Amber to explain her husband's absence, her attorney could only mumble something about Derek being unavailable due to other legal matters. Mrs. Morrison, the judge said, her voice carrying the weight of years of experience with family court manipulation, the evidence presented here today shows a systematic campaign to defraud multiple family members and manipulate the custody system for financial gain. I'm dismissing your petition for emergency custody, and I'm ordering a full investigation into your household's fitness as a placement for any children. The gavel coming down felt like the sound of justice finally being served, but it also marked the end of any possibility of reconciliation with Amber. The weeks that followed brought a series of revelations that completed the picture of just how close Tyler and I had come to disaster. Derek was arrested trying to board a flight to a non-extradition country with a suitcase full of cash that turned out to be the last of Linda's life savings. Amber, faced with the loss of her house and the reality of her husband's crimes, finally told the truth about the years of manipulation and fraud that had defined their marriage. Brittany and Chloe were placed temporarily with their other grandparents while Amber underwent counseling and tried to rebuild her life away from Derek's toxic influence. Linda, for her part, moved into a small apartment near my house with money she'd managed to recover from Derek's seized assets. Our relationship didn't magically heal overnight. Years of favoritism and hurtful behavior don't disappear with a single court victory, but she began the slow work of trying to understand how her treatment of me had created the perfect conditions for Derek to operate. I always thought I was protecting Amber, she told me during one of our carefully supervised visits with Tyler present. I never realized I was helping a criminal destroy my own family. Tyler, resilient in the way that children often are, adapted to our new reality with remarkable grace. He was sad about losing his cousins, confused about what had happened to Uncle Derek, but ultimately relieved that the confusing drama and constant tension had finally ended. His birthday party the following year was a small celebration with just the people who truly loved him. Carol and her family, Jake and his wife, Linda with her careful new understanding of appropriate boundaries, and a few classmates who appreciated Tyler for the kind, funny kid he'd always been. The most profound change, however, was in how I understood my own worth and strength. For years, I'd accepted my family's treatment of Tyler and me because I thought we didn't deserve better, that being the difficult daughter and the tragic single mother was just our lot in life. Derek and Amber's systematic attack on us had forced me to fight back, and in fighting back, I'd discovered that I was stronger, smarter, and more deserving of respect than I'd ever believed possible. 6 months after the hearing, Jake helped me file a successful lawsuit against Derek for the emotional damage and financial losses he'd caused our family. The settlement money wasn't life-changing, but it was enough to give Tyler and me some security and breathing room. More importantly, it sent a message that there were consequences for people who tried to destroy families for their own gain. Tyler is now 10 years old, and he's growing up in a house filled with genuine love and support rather than manipulation and conditional approval. He has honest relationships with the family members who earned their place in our lives, and he's learned that sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the family you're born into. When people ask him about the drama that nearly tore us apart, he says simply, "Some people in my family were making bad choices, but my mom fought to keep us together, and now we're happy." As for me, I've learned that protecting the people you love sometimes means being willing to lose the people who claim to love you. Setting boundaries with toxic family members isn't selfish, it's necessary for creating a life where love is based on respect rather than control. The family that tried to destroy us for their own benefit is gone, but the family we've built from the ashes is stronger, healthier, and more genuine than anything we lost. The birthday party that started this whole battle was supposed to be about celebrating Tyler's 9th year of life. Instead, it became the moment I finally learned to celebrate our worth as human beings who deserved better than we'd been getting. Sometimes the best gift you can give your child isn't a perfect party. It's the willingness to fight for their right to be loved unconditionally, even when that fight costs you everything you thought you wanted. Looking back now, I realize that the phone call demanding I cancel Tyler's birthday party wasn't the beginning of our family's problems, it was the moment I finally stopped accepting unacceptable treatment and started building the kind of life my son deserved to grow up in. And that, more than any birthday party, is a celebration worth fighting for. If you've ever felt trapped in a toxic family situation or questioned whether you deserve better treatment from the people who claim to love you, I want you to know that your worth isn't determined by other people's approval. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who make you smaller, even when they share your DNA. What's your experience with setting boundaries with difficult family members? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your children? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in this struggle. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories that explore the complicated dynamics of love, loyalty, and learning when to let go. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better than conditional love and that fighting for your children's well-being is always worth it, even when the cost seems too high. Remember, building a healthy family sometimes means breaking an unhealthy cycle, and the courage to start over can be the greatest gift you give to the next generation. Thank you for listening to our story, and I hope it brings you the strength to write your own ending, whatever that looks like for your family.